The storm came without warning. Not that Eleanor Whitmore would have slowed down even if she'd known. She never slowed down. That was the thing people said about her in hushed voices at industry conferences, in boardrooms where her name appeared on quarterly projections, in the kind of profile pieces that used words like visionary and relentless in the same paragraph. Eleanor Whitmore didn't break. Eleanor Whitmore didn't flinch. She was doing 83 miles per hour when the rear wheels found the ice. It was a Tuesday in late January. Denver had been spitting snow since noon. The kind of fine, persistent snow that doesn't look like much from inside a heated conference room, but transforms every highway in the state into a mirror by nightfall. The meeting at Whitmore Analytics headquarters had run 4 hours over schedule. Her CFO, Marcus Hale, had insisted on walking through every line of the Q4 projections before the board presentation on Thursday, and Eleanor had sat at the head of that glass table and dismantled his numbers with a calm, surgical precision that had made 2 junior analysts excuse themselves to the bathroom and not come back. By the time she reached the underground garage, it was 9:47. Her assistant, Thomas, had texted her 3 times with weather warnings. She had read none of them. The Audi Q8 was warm. The heated seats engaged automatically. Eleanor pulled up the hands-free display and started running through Thursday's deck as she merged onto I-70 heading west. Toward the house in Evergreen she barely slept in, miles of dark road ahead, the city lights thinning behind her. Snow coming down in curtains now, not individual flakes but whole walls of white pressing against the windshield. She was thinking about a paragraph in slide 14 when the car shifted beneath her. It was subtle at first. A correction from the traction control. A slight drift in the rear axle that the car's system registered and compensated for without her input. Eleanor didn't feel it as danger. She felt it as inconvenience, as a half-second pause in her review of the slide deck. Then, the second patch of ice caught the front wheels. The correction came too hard. The car swung wide to the left, not a drift anymore, but a full rotation. The nose swinging around toward the median, the headlights suddenly sweeping across 3 lanes of empty highway in a slow, terrible arc. Eleanor gripped the wheel. She did not scream. She applied counter-pressure the way she'd been taught in a defensive driving course she'd taken 12 years ago and never thought about again. The car completed 2 full rotations before hitting the concrete median barrier at 41 miles per hour. The airbags went off. The windshield cracked but held. The left side of the car compressed inward. Eleanor's head snapped to the right and struck the window frame despite the airbag. A hard, flat impact that was less like pain and more like the sudden removal of the entire world from around her. Then, nothing. She came back slowly, not all the way. That was the strange part. She came back to sound first, a rhythmic beeping. Footsteps, the hiss and click of machines she couldn't name, and then to a kind of muted physical awareness, her body present but distant, like she was receiving signals from it through several feet of cotton. She could feel the shape of a bed beneath her, the pull of something attached to her arm, the weight of a blanket that was too thin. She could not open her eyes. She tried. She sent the signal, clearly and deliberately, the way she made every decision, with full intention and total commitment. Nothing happened. Her eyelids did not move. Her fingers did not respond. Her tongue lay heavy and useless behind her teeth. But she heard everything. The first voice was male, clipped, professional. A doctor, she would realize later, explaining to someone in the hallway that the patient had sustained a severe traumatic brain injury in the accident, that there was significant swelling, that she was non-responsive to verbal and pain stimuli, that they would know more in 48 hours, but that family should be notified and should be prepared. A pause. Then, she doesn't have family, not that we've been able to reach. Another pause. There are representatives from her company downstairs. Eleanor lay in the dark and listened. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was completely, utterly still. They came in pairs, mostly. Marcus Hale and the company's general counsel, a woman named Patricia Crane, arrived first. Eleanor heard them before she saw them. Not that she could see anything. Heard the specific rhythm of their footsteps. Marcus's deliberate and heavy. Patricia's sharp and measured, a woman who wore her authority in her shoes. They stood at the foot of her bed. There was a silence, the kind that contains a calculation. "She looks bad," Marcus said. "She looks like she's asleep," Patricia said. "That's what bad looks like." Another silence. Eleanor heard the soft sound of someone shifting their weight, the rustle of a coat. She imagined Patricia crossing her arms. She had seen that posture 1,000 times across conference tables. "The Thursday presentation," Marcus said. "We're going to have to postpone, or proceed without her. The board won't. The board," Patricia said carefully, "will have to adapt to new realities. If she's not functional in 72 hours, we have a fiduciary obligation to provide continuity of leadership. That's not callousness, Marcus. That's governance." Eleanor listened. She had hired Patricia Crane 8 years ago, paid her $640,000 a year, trusted her with the company's most sensitive legal decisions. She had once called Patricia the most reliable person she knew, which was, in retrospect, a very particular kind of compliment. "The voting trust," Marcus said, "her block is 41%, which is not 51%. A pause. Longer this time. Eleanor heard the hiss of the ventilation system, the distant sound of a phone in the hallway, the beeping of her own monitors, steady and indifferent. "We should be careful," Marcus said, and he sounded almost uncomfortable. Almost like the man Eleanor had hired 12 years ago, the CFO who used to bring her coffee on late nights and argue with her about growth rates with something resembling genuine passion. "We are being careful," Patricia said. "We are being responsible." They left 11 minutes later. Eleanor had been counting. The second visitor was someone Eleanor thought of, still as a friend. Diane Holloway had been in Eleanor's life for 9 years. They had met at a Women in Tech Summit in San Francisco, bonded over terrible wine and a shared contempt for a panel moderator who kept rephrasing their answers in simpler language. They had dinner 3 or 4 times a year, exchanged a particular kind of knowing message when something absurd happened in the industry, showed up for each other at the 3 or 4 events each year that felt genuinely important. Diane sat beside Eleanor's bed and held her hand. Eleanor felt the warmth of it, that at least. She felt the warmth, and for a moment something in her chest loosened, something that had been clenched since she woke to darkness. Then Diane's phone buzzed. She didn't let go of Eleanor's hand. But Eleanor heard her shift, heard the small sound of the screen unlocking. A text, received, read, a text, composed and sent. Eleanor could hear the soft percussion of the keyboard, then another, and then, so quietly that it was almost not there at all, almost just breath. God, this is going to complicate everything with the Series D. She didn't say it to anyone. She said it the way people say things to themselves when they believe they are alone. A reflex, an honest thought escaping before manners could catch it. She put her phone away, held Eleanor's hand for another 7 minutes, said, "Come back, Ellie, we need you," in a voice that sounded, if you weren't listening closely, like love. Then she left. Eleanor lay in the dark, 41% of the company. The Series D. Governance. Fiduciary obligations. She had built Whitmore Analytics from nothing, from a spare bedroom and a second-hand server, and the particular kind of desperation that follows losing everything, and now, 72 hours after an accident she didn't choose, the people she had trusted with that thing were standing at its edges and calculating what they could carry away. She had known this world was cold. She had built herself to survive it. But knowing a thing and lying still in the dark while it happens to you are, it turns out, not the same thing at all. In the spaces between visitors, Eleanor thought about her father. She thought about him the way you think about someone you've spent a long time not thinking about, in fragments, in sensory flashes, in the particular quality of a certain kind of winter light. He had died when she was 16. A cardiac event, gone between a Tuesday morning and a Tuesday afternoon, while Eleanor was sitting in AP chemistry learning about bond energies. Her mother had already been gone by then, a different kind of leaving, a slow withdrawal that had started when Eleanor was 9 and ended when she was 12, and they moved across town, and her mother stopped returning calls. Eleanor had no siblings, no extended family who stayed close. She had gone from high school to a scholarship, to college, to a series of internships, to a startup that failed, and then another that didn't, and then Whitmore Analytics. And somewhere in that progression she had, very efficiently, replaced the need for people with the acquisition of things that could not disappoint her. Systems, data, projections, control. She had been, she thought now, lying immobile in a hospital bed in Denver, listening to the ventilation system, very good at it, at building things, at making herself necessary, at surrounding herself with people who valued her enough to stay close without her ever having to be vulnerable enough to need them. She thought about her college roommate, a girl named Sarah Brennan, who used to leave notes on the bathroom mirror that said things like, "You worked too hard today, rest, and I saved you the last of the pasta," and who had drifted away gradually over a decade of unreturned calls and rescheduled plans until she was just a name on a holiday card list that Eleanor's assistant managed. She thought about the man she had almost married, a fund manager named Gregory, who had said, the night he ended things, "Eleanor, I don't think you're capable of letting anyone in," and whom Eleanor had dismissed at the time as someone who mistook her self-sufficiency for a wound. She had driven home from that conversation, she remembered now, without music, without a phone call to process it with anyone, without even the particular relief of crying. She had driven home in silence and opened her laptop and worked until 2 in the morning, and had told herself, and believed it, she had genuinely believed it, that this was not avoidance. This was just who she was. This was just how she was built. Lying still in the dark, she was less certain. She had built a wall and called it a boundary. She had called her distance professionalism, her control strength, her loneliness focus, and it had worked. By every external measure, it had worked beautifully, and she had arrived at this bed with 41% of a company worth $900 million, and no one in the world who had come to this hospital for her rather than for what she represented. The machines beeped. The snow pressed against the window. Eleanor Whitmore, for the first time in 20 years, did not know what to do. He knocked. That was the first thing. He knocked on the door of a room occupied by a woman in a coma, which was both quietly absurd and, Eleanor would think later, exactly the kind of person he was. She heard the knock. 2 short, polite raps. A pause. The door opening. Footsteps, different from all the others. Not the confident stride of a professional or the soft-souled haste of medical staff. These were the footsteps of someone doing a job carefully, methodically, without rush. A cart wheeled in behind him. The particular sound of a cleaning cart, the rattle of the lower shelf, the squeak of a wheel that needed oil. She heard him move through the room in a systematic pattern, working from the door inward. The bathroom, first water running briefly, the spray of disinfectant, the wipe of hard surfaces. Then, out into the main room, the floor, the window ledge, the surfaces around the monitoring equipment approached with careful attention to not disturbing anything connected to the patient. He worked without earbuds, without music, without the low muttering of a phone conversation. Just the sounds of the work itself and, beneath that, the winter quiet of the hospital. He was almost done when he stopped. A pause, just at the side of her bed. "Hi," he said. His voice was medium-low, unhurried. There was something in it that Eleanor, whose entire adult life had been spent calibrating voices for what they wanted, could not immediately place. It took her a moment. Then she had it. Nothing. He wanted nothing. The voice contained no ask, no calculation, no positioning. It was just a human voice speaking to another human being. "I know you probably can't hear me," he said. "Or I don't know. The nurses say it's hard to know what people in your situation can take in. But I figure, better to assume you can." A pause. The sound of him leaning on the cart handle, a small shift of weight. "I'm Daniel. I work evenings here, mostly this wing." Another pause. "I'm not going to pretend this is normal, talking to someone like this, but this room is quiet, and you looked, I don't know, not comfortable, but like someone who might want a voice in the room." He finished wiping down the last surface. "I hope you feel better," he said. "I mean that. Not just because it's the thing to say." The cart wheeled toward the door. The door opened. He was gone. Eleanor lay in the dark. It had been 4 days since the accident. 14 different people had stood in this room and spoken in this room, and not one of them had spoken to her the way he just had. Not to her record. Not to her shares. Not to what she owed them, or what they owed her, or what would happen if she didn't wake up. Just to her. He came back the next evening. And the one after that. Eleanor started listening for the cart. The squeak of the second wheel from the left, she had mapped it by now announcing itself at the far end of the hall, growing closer. She would catch herself orienting toward the sound with something she could only call anticipation, which was an uncomfortable feeling for a woman who prided herself on wanting nothing she didn't already have. Daniel talked while he worked. Not continuously, he wasn't a man who filled silence just to fill it. He talked in the way some people do when they're processing something, when the act of speaking out loud helps them hold a thing steady enough to look at it. The second night, he talked about his daughter. "Lily is 7, he said, scrubbing the window ledge with the particular focus of someone who finds satisfaction in doing a thing correctly. 7 3/4, she'd tell you, because she is deeply invested in the 3/4. She started counting the quarters when she realized they were going to start mattering to her fractions in school. She decided if she was going to have to learn them, she was going to use them. Eleanor heard the smile in it. The particular warmth a parent gets when a child's personality asserts itself as something distinct and real. "She wants to be a marine biologist," Daniel continued. "Or a pilot. Or a marine biologist who also pilots the planes that take marine biologists to the ocean. She's not super concerned with feasibility at this point, which I find, honestly, very healthy." He moved to the monitors. "Careful there. Slow, not disturbing the connections. Her mother, my wife, Rebecca, she was the one who taught Lily to argue like that. Always told her, figure out what you want first, then figure out how to get there. Don't work backward from what other people say is possible." A pause. Long enough that Eleanor wasn't sure if he was going to continue. "Rebecca died 22 months ago, he said. Ovarian cancer. She was 33. The room held the words. "I'm still, I don't know. Working out how to do this, the single dad thing. I had a different plan, you know? Not a detailed plan. Just a general understanding that we were doing this together." He exhaled slowly. "Lily keeps a photo of her on the nightstand. She talks to it sometimes. I haven't figured out whether to say anything about that or just let it be what it is." The cart squeaked toward the door. "Sorry," he said. "That was probably a lot. I don't usually." A short, almost embarrassed laugh. "The night shift does something to your head. Everything feels more honest at night, or maybe just less supervised." He left. Eleanor thought about Rebecca. She thought about a woman she would never meet, who had told her daughter to figure out what she wanted first. She thought about the nightstand photo and a 7 3/4-year-old who talked to it. She thought about her own father's photograph, which was in a box in a closet in the Evergreen house, which she had not looked at in, she realized, several years. He brought her on a Sunday afternoon. Eleanor heard them in the hallway, first his voice, low and explaining something, and then a smaller voice asking a question. The door opened. "This is the lady I told you about," Daniel said. "The one I've been." A brief hesitation. Saying hi to evenings. Small footsteps. unhurried, curious. "Why is she sleeping so long?" Lily asked. "Her brain got hurt in the accident." When a brain gets hurt, sometimes it needs a very long time to rest before it's ready to work again. Like when I had that concussion from the bike. A bit like that? Bigger. Lily was quiet for a moment. Eleanor imagined her dark-haired, probably serious face, the three-quarters making itself known even in her silences. "Does she know we're here?" Lily asked. "We're not sure," Daniel said. "We think maybe people can hear things, even when they can't respond. But we don't know for certain." A pause. Then the small, sure sound of a child deciding something. Small footsteps closer. The shift of a chair being pulled to the bedside, and then, delicately, with the specific carefulness of a child who has been taught to be gentle with things that matter, a small hand found Eleanor's hand and held it. "Hi," Lily said. "I'm Lily. My dad talks to you sometimes, so you won't be lonely." Eleanor felt the hand. Warm, dry, small enough that her own hand, the hand that had signed $900 million worth of contracts and pointed at whiteboards and held phones for 1,000 urgent calls, almost swallowed it completely. "I don't think you're lonely anymore," Lily said, with the matter-of-fact certainty of a 7-year-old who has decided a thing. "Because we're here, and even if you can't say anything, being here counts. My mom used to say that. Being somewhere for someone counts even when you can't fix anything." Silence. "I brought you something." The sound of a backpack zipper, a small object placed on the nightstand. Eleanor couldn't see it, but she heard the small, definite sound of it being set down with purpose. "It's a shell, a real one. I found it at the beach in California when we went to visit Grandma. My dad says shells are just houses that animals don't need anymore. But I think they're still houses. I think they're still home." Daniel's voice, soft. "Lily, I want her to have it," Lily said firmly. "She can give it back when she's better." Eleanor lay in the dark. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had not cried at her father's funeral, holding herself rigid in the second pew of a church she'd never attended before and never attended after, because she had understood even then that crying was a form of losing control, and losing control was a form of losing. Full stop. She had not cried when Gregory left, had not cried when her first startup failed, had not cried in the hospital room 2 years ago when her doctor used the word serious about a blood pressure reading, and Eleanor had simply nodded and said, "What's the treatment protocol?" But lying in this bed, with a child's warm hand in hers and a shell on the nightstand that was still a home, Eleanor Whitmore felt something move behind her sternum, deep and private and almost geological, a shift in something that had been set in position for a very long time. She could not cry. She could not speak. She could not squeeze the hand back. She could only lie still and feel it, and feel it, and feel it. The week that followed was a study in human nature. Marcus came twice more. The first time, he was careful, professional, appropriately solemn. The second time, he came with a man Eleanor didn't recognize, an outside consultant from the tone of it, someone being quietly introduced to the company's operations in the event of a prolonged leadership absence. They spoke in the particular low, urgent registers of people who need things not to be overheard. Eleanor heard every word. Patricia Crane came once, alone, and spent most of her visit on her phone. Before she left, she stood at the foot of the bed and looked at Eleanor with an expression Eleanor could not see, but could hear in the silence, the particular silence of someone calculating odds. A junior analyst named Brent, whom Eleanor had hired 6 months ago and had spoken to perhaps 5 times, came and sat for 20 minutes and said nothing at all, and then left, which Eleanor found, unexpectedly, the most touching of all the professional visits. He had come with no agenda she could detect. He had simply come. Diane did not return. The nights were the clearest time. The hospital quieted. The professional visits stopped. Eleanor was alone with the machines and the building's infrastructure, sounds, and her own thoughts. which had become, over these days of enforced stillness, stranger and more honest than they had been in years. She thought about the word powerful, how she had built her life around it, around the accumulation of power as a form of safety. Because if you were powerful enough, nothing could happen to you without your permission. And here she was, without permission, in a bed she hadn't chosen, in a body she couldn't command, and all the power she had accumulated was sitting in a building on the other side of the city, being quietly redistributed by people who had never once, not once, called her to say, "Are you all right?" Not the company. You. Daniel came on Thursday. He was quieter than usual. He worked through the room in his usual methodical way, and when he got to the monitors, he stopped the way he always did. But he didn't start talking right away. He stood there, and Eleanor heard him breathing, slightly heavier than usual, and she thought, something happened. "Lily asked about her mom today," he said finally, out of nowhere. "We were making dinner, she was helping with the pasta. She likes to do the timer, and she just said, 'Dad, do you think Mom can see us?' And I said, 'I hoped so,' and she said." A pause. "I don't know if we are doing okay," he said. "We're doing. I don't know about the okay part. But Lily seemed." He stopped. She seemed sure about it. She seemed to need it to be true, and maybe that's enough. Maybe the being sure is its own kind of truth. He finished the monitors. "I heard there's maybe a position in Colorado Springs," he said. "Hospital, there needs someone with my certification. Better pay. Better hours, which means better time with Lily. I've been sitting on it for a week because I don't know." He moved toward the door. "I'll probably take it," he said. "If you're still here and you can hear this, I hope you're okay in there. I think you're probably a person people underestimate. I don't know why I think that. Just a feeling." The door closed. Eleanor lay in the dark. A person people underestimate. He had no idea who she was. He had stood in her room for 11 evenings and talked to her and seen, in whatever way he was seeing her, something he couldn't name. Not Eleanor Whitmore, the CEO. Not the 41% block of stock. Not the board presentation, or the Series D, or the governance structure. Just a person, quiet in a bed, maybe listening. She lay in the dark and thought, "I want to wake up, not for the company, not for the board, not to reclaim her 41% or her corner office or her position in any of the rankings she appeared in." She thought about a 7-year-old who talked to a photograph on a nightstand. She thought about a woman named Rebecca who had said, "Figure out what you want first." She thought about a shell on the nightstand that was still a home. "I want to wake up. I don't want to miss whatever comes next." He came on a Friday. Eleanor knew it was Friday by the different rhythm of the floor, fewer administrative voices, a different pace to the shift changes, the quieter background of a weekend settling into the building's bones. She knew it was Daniel by the cart, the familiar squeak, the particular pattern of his knock. But when he came in, she heard it immediately. The weight of something in his steps, something decided. Something that had already happened and was about to be said. He worked quickly tonight. Not perfunctory, she had come to understand that he was never perfunctory, that he was constitutionally incapable of doing a job without caring about it, but efficiently, as if he was running on a limited amount of time for the last part, the part where he stopped at the monitors. He stopped. "I took the job," he said. He let that sit for a moment. "It came through yesterday. I said yes this morning, before I could talk myself out of it again." A pause. "Lily doesn't know yet. I'm going to tell her tonight. She's going to be sad about some things and excited about others. And she's going to want to talk about it until midnight. And I'm going to let her, because she needs to talk things through and she got that from her mother, and I'm not going to be the person who makes her wrong about that." He was quiet. "Last shift here is 2 weeks from today," he said. I might not be on this wing every night, the next 2 weeks. Depends on staffing." He exhaled. So this might be the last time I talk to you like this." Eleanor heard him pull the chair Lily had sat in, to the bedside. He sat down. "I know you can't hear this," he said. "Or you can. I've been going back and forth on it for weeks, and I've landed on, I'm going to act like you can. Because the alternative, acting like you can't, seems like a way of making this easier for me and not actually easier for you. And you're the one in the bed, so," a small laugh, short and honest. "You looked like someone who was tired," he said. "The first time I came in here, before I ever said anything, you were very still, and the machines were all working, and there was something about your face." He stopped. "I've seen a lot of patients. It's part of the job. And I've learned to not look, exactly, but notice. And I noticed that you looked like someone who had been running for a very long time." The room was very quiet. "I hope you rest," he said. "I hope whatever you needed to rest from, I hope this was enough of it. And I hope when you wake up, if you wake up, I hope you have people around you. Real ones." He stood. The chair slid back. "My daughter left you a shell," he said. "She's going to ask me if you still have it. I'd like to be able to tell her yes." He picked up the cart handle. "Take care of yourself, whoever you are." The door opened. The door closed. The cart squeaked down the corridor, growing fainter. The second wheel from the left marking his progress until the sound turned a corner and disappeared. Eleanor Whitmore lay in the dark. She thought about the shell. She thought about whoever you are said with no edge, no irony, no diminishment. Just honest acknowledgement that she was a person he didn't know, and that it was enough, that she was worth talking to anyway. She thought about her father in a box in a closet in the Evergreen house. She thought about Sarah Brennan's notes on the bathroom mirror. She thought about a 7-year-old telling a photograph. "I think she can see that we're doing okay." Something shifted. Not metaphorically, actually shifted. A physical sensation, like something loosening in her chest. Like pressure releasing from a valve that had been sealed for so long she'd forgotten it was there. It spread outward, through her shoulders, down her arms, all the way to her hands, which were, she realized with a distant, stunned recognition, trembling. Her fingers moved. The monitor registered the change at 11:14 p.m. A change in brain activity. The attending on call told her about this later, showed her the readout, walked her through what it looked like in the data when the gap between where she had been and where she needed to get suddenly started to close. It was not instantaneous. It was not dramatic, not from the outside. There was no movie moment where the eyes flew open and the machines started screaming. It was slow, and then faster. She felt her hand first, then her arm, then her face, the strange, almost painful sensation of feeling returning to the muscles of her jaw, her eyelids, her neck. She tried to open her eyes and couldn't, and then tried again. And the second time, there was a millimeter of separation, a sliver of light, overwhelming and beautiful. She closed them again, tried again. The ceiling of the hospital room, white acoustic tiles, a fluorescent light, dim at this hour, casting everything in a flat, blue-pale glow. The monitors to her left, a window to her right where snow had been. She turned her head. The world spinning slightly where snow was falling still, or falling again. She couldn't tell how many days had accumulated in the window. A nurse at the desk outside the room, visible through the interior window, head bent over paperwork. Eleanor opened her mouth. What came out was barely a sound. A scrape of air across vocal cords that had been unused for she had no idea how long. A week? More? She tried again, cleared her throat with an effort that felt like lifting something very heavy with muscles she'd forgotten how to use. "Hello," she said. The nurse looked up. What followed was organized chaos. The attending called in, a rapid neurological assessment, lights in her eyes, hands on her reflexes. Questions asked and answered her name, the date as best she could estimate it, the name of the president, whether she knew where she was. She answered them all. She answered them with the clear, flat precision of a woman who was assembling herself back into functionality in real time, pulling herself together through sheer will and the particular kind of controlled focus that had, in another context, built a $900 million company. When the immediate flurry had passed and the attending had gone to write his notes and the floor nurse had settled back into the room to monitor, Eleanor turned her head toward the nightstand. The shell was there. Small, pale beige, the kind that catches light interestingly if you angle it right. Still a home. She lay back. "I heard everything," she said quietly. To no one in particular, or to everyone, or to herself. The nurse looked up. "I'm sorry?" "Nothing," Eleanor said. "Can you get me a phone?" Recovery was not fast. Eleanor had expected, because she was Eleanor, because efficiency was the architecture of her thinking, that waking up would be the hard part, and that the waking up would be followed swiftly by a return to function. This was not how it worked. The brain, she was told by a neurologist named Dr. Paxton, who had the unhurried directness Eleanor found she suddenly preferred in people, needed time, deliberate time, the kind that could not be accelerated by force of will. "You've spent your whole life pushing through things," Dr. Paxton said, at their first proper consultation, 12 days after Eleanor's recovery. "Your brain is asking you to stop doing that, for a specific and limited period, because it is engaged in work that pushing through actually disrupts. This is not a character failing. It is neuroplasticity." Eleanor accepted this. She did not like it, but she accepted it, which was itself, Dr. Paxton told her, encouraging. She had time, then. Weeks of it. Hospital, then inpatient rehabilitation, then the house in Evergreen with a care team and a physical therapist named Howard who was both demanding and kind in the way good teachers are demanding and kind. Time, in amounts she had not had since she was a child sick with something ordinary, feverish and still. Her father bringing her soup and the specific comfort of being allowed to be unproductive. She used the time to think, and to make calls when her voice was back and her focus could hold for more than 20 minutes. The calls were not the calls people expected. She did not call Marcus Hale first. She did not call Patricia Crane. She called Brent, the junior analyst who had sat with her in silence for 20 minutes with no agenda. "I heard you came," she said, when he picked up, clearly baffled by the caller ID. "Miss Whitmore?" he said, and then stopped. "I heard you came," she said again. "That was kind. I wanted you to know I knew." A long pause on the line. "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there," she said. "How are the Q4 numbers looking?" The changes at Whitmore Analytics came over months, not days. Eleanor was deliberate about it. She had lain in a bed and heard what her company looked like when it thought she wasn't watching. And she made decisions based on that knowledge, not in anger, not as punishment, but as simple, clear-eyed recalibration. The consultant Marcus had brought in to learn her operations was thanked and shown the door. Patricia Crane was given an honest conversation. "I know what you were doing, and I understand why you thought it was appropriate. And I want to tell you directly that the governance structure of this company does not exist to be redistributed in the event of my incapacitation." Patricia had listened, and to her credit, had not pretended Eleanor was wrong. Some people stayed. Brent, who turned out, in the months that followed, to have the sharpest pattern recognition instincts on the analytics team. A VP of engineering named Carolyn Webb, who had apparently spent Eleanor's hospitalization writing a proposal for a team restructuring she'd been sitting on for 2 years, figuring she might as well, and who presented it to Eleanor 3 weeks after she returned to a modified work schedule with a directness Eleanor recognized as the good kind. Some people left. That was all right too. The company did not collapse. The board presentation that had been scheduled for the Thursday after the accident finally happened in April, 4 months later, with Eleanor at the head of the table, still moving more carefully than she used to, still pausing, sometimes mid-sentence, as her recovering brain found the path between what she knew and what she could say, and the numbers were, as it turned out, fine. More than fine. But the more important changes were quieter. Eleanor found Sarah Brennan on the internet. She was a landscape architect in Portland now, married, 2 kids, a third apparently on the way based on the most recent photograph Eleanor found. She wrote her a letter, an actual letter, on paper and sent it to the address the internet suggested might still be current, and said in it that she had been thinking about the bathroom mirror notes and that she was sorry it had been so long and that she hoped Sarah was well. She did not know if she would get a response. She sent it anyway. She had her father's photograph framed. She hung it in the Evergreen house, in the room where she worked in the mornings before the care team arrived. And she did not feel sentimental about it in the way she had feared she would. She felt something simpler. She felt the specific, uncomplicated comfort of looking at a face that had loved her when she was too young to be useful to anyone, when she had nothing to offer except herself. No title, no stock, no quarterly projection. Just a small girl with her father's eyes in a house they had shared for 16 years before the Tuesday afternoon that ended it. She had earned everything that came after on her own, and she was, she supposed, still proud of that. But she understood now the difference between what she had earned and what she had lost in the earning of it. The difference between a wall you build to protect something and a wall that slowly replaces the something it was meant to protect. That, it turned out, was enough to look at on certain mornings. She found him in early March. It was not difficult, the hospital had records, and Eleanor was, professionally speaking, very good at finding information. She knew he had transferred to a hospital in Colorado Springs in mid-February. She knew, from a single, careful conversation with a nurse on his former floor, who clearly adored him, that he had taken Lily to see the aquarium in Denver 2 weekends prior, and that Lily had apparently needed to be gently removed from the jellyfish exhibit because she had decided to stay there permanently. The nurse had laughed, telling it, the kind of laugh that carries genuine fondness. And Eleanor had listened and thought, that is what it sounds like when someone knows a person, not knows their title or their function or their value to a system, just knows them. She drove to Colorado Springs on a Saturday. She had not called ahead. She had thought about it and decided against it, because a call would give him time to prepare, and she did not want him to prepare. She wanted to find him the way she had first found him, unguarded, just working, just being a person doing the things that needed doing. She found them in a park. It was the kind of late winter day that can't decide if it's still winter or something else cold, but with a quality to the light that suggested the season was considering its options. The park had a small man-made pond with ducks who seemed deeply skeptical about the remaining ice at its edges. There was a wide path around the pond, and on one bench near the western shore, a man was sitting with a thermos while, some distance away, a girl was crouched at the water's edge, engaged in something that looked like a very serious negotiation with a duck. Eleanor parked. She walked across the winter-brown grass. He saw her before she reached the bench. She watched him look at her, not with recognition, not yet, just the ordinary watchfulness of a parent monitoring an approaching stranger, and then something in his face shifted as she got close enough for him to see her clearly. "Hi," she said. He stood up slowly. He stopped. I'm Eleanor." She stopped a few feet away. "The woman from room 412, the one who was." A small pause. "I was awake," she said. "The whole time, I could hear everything." A long silence. The duck near Lily made a sound of profound displeasure and retreated to deeper water. "You could hear me," he said. He looked at her, not with calculation, not with the particular assessment she was used to from people meeting Eleanor Whitmore for the first time when they knew who she was. He looked at her the way he had looked at a woman in a hospital bed, which was to say, like a person. Like someone worth looking at because she was there. "I'm glad you're okay," he said. It came out simple, unadorned, and entirely true. Lily had noticed. Small feet on winter grass, approaching with the direct trajectory of a child who has decided to investigate something. She stopped beside her father and looked at Eleanor. "Are you the lady?" she said. "I think so," Eleanor said. "I'm Eleanor." Lily considered this. "Do you still have the shell?" Eleanor reached into her coat pocket. She had brought it, had gone to the Evergreen house before the drive south, and found it on her nightstand, where it had been placed with a clarity of intention she had no desire to undo. She held it out. Lily looked at it, then looked at Eleanor. "You can keep it," she said. "I think it wants to stay with you." Eleanor looked at the shell in her palm. The pale beige curve of it, the weight that was almost no weight, the lip of it where the light caught differently. "I told you about her," Daniel said to Lily. "I told you about the woman I used to say hi to at the hospital. You said she was brave," Lily said, with the specificity of someone who was paying attention when things were said to her. "You said you could tell because of her face." Eleanor looked at Daniel. He had the expression of a man who has been very accurately quoted at an unexpected moment. "I said something like that," he allowed. "You were right," Eleanor said. She was not a woman who said things like this easily. She said it anyway. "I was trying. I just wasn't sure what I was trying for." The duck had reconsidered and returned. Lily crouched down again, reaching into her coat for what appeared to be half a piece of bread she had been saving specifically for this purpose. Daniel looked at Eleanor. "You drove from Denver? Why didn't you call?" "I wasn't sure you'd want," she stopped. "I didn't want you to have time to be prepared," she said honestly. "I wanted to find you the way I found you before, when you were just being yourself." He looked at her for a moment, and then something in his expression did a small, quiet thing. Not a smile exactly, but the beginning of one, the tectonic precursor. "That's a strange thing to say." "I know, but I think I understand it." They stood in the March cold, the water behind them. Lily engaged in earnest cross-species diplomacy at the pond's edge, the sky the color of old silver. Eleanor had 41% of a company worth $900 million, and a frame on a wall in Evergreen, and a physical therapist named Howard, and a letter, possibly in transit to Portland, and a shell in her palm that still knew how to be a home. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her. "You were there," he said simply. "That's all." "That's not a small thing," Eleanor said. "It turns out," Lily stood up, brushed her hands on her coat, and turned back toward them with the satisfied expression of someone who has successfully negotiated a treaty. "The duck wants more bread," she reported, "but I only had the one piece. I told it I'd bring more next time." "Deal," Daniel said. "Deal." Lily agreed and looked at Eleanor. "Are you staying?" Eleanor looked at the pond, at the skeptical ducks and the winter pale light and the path around the water and the bench with the thermos and the ordinary, unguarded texture of an afternoon that wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. She thought about the long drive back north on a highway she knew better now, in winter light. She thought about the shell in her hand. "For a while," she said. Lily nodded, satisfied, and took her father's hand, and turned back toward the pond. Eleanor stood in the cold and felt the weight of the shell. Very small. Almost nothing. The kind of thing that fits easily in a pocket, that you can carry with you without noticing the weight, the kind of thing you carry anyway. For a long time she had believed that wealth was a wall. The higher you built it, the safer you were. She had been right about the wall, and wrong about what it kept out. What it kept out was this: a park in winter. A child who negotiated with ducks. A man who knocked before entering a room. The ordinary, irreplaceable weight of being somewhere for someone. Even when you can't fix anything. Even when all you can do is be there. That's enough. That counts.